There's a question that has haunted ambitious people for centuries, one that divides dreamers from rulers. What is the fastest way to financial freedom? Not the safest, not the most moral, but the fastest. It's a question that makes the average person uncomfortable because it forces them to face a truth they'd rather ignore, that the system they serve was never designed for them to escape. Most people will never find the answer because they chase illusions dressed as opportunity. They mistake movement for progress. They spend decades working hard, saving diligently, obeying quietly, and they call it wisdom. But what if their so-called wisdom is the very thing that keeps them poor? As Machiavelli once wrote, men are destroyed when they pursue what they desire instead of what gives them advantage. The modern world is a graveyard of such men ruins built from good intentions and blind obedience. The masses have been trained to believe that patience and virtue will one day set them free. Yet, look closely. Those who built that narrative were never patient, never humble. They were calculating. They understood that control, not virtue, governs destiny. Work hard, stay humble, wait your turn. These were not lessons from the wise. They were commands from the powerful. Slogans crafted to keep the builders building, while the architects collect the rent. Centuries ago, in Florence, Machiavelli observed the Medici family bankers who ruled kings and commanded nations. They didn't carry swords, they carried ledgers. Their armies were made of numbers, not men. They understood what every ruler eventually learns. Gold is not the goal, it's the lever. Money was merely the language through which control was spoken. To own wealth is not to possess coins, it's to direct movement. And he who directs movement commands men. That truth hasn't changed, only the tools have. Today's Medicis wear hoodies, not crowns. Their palaces are digital. They build systems instead of cathedrals, and their influence spans continents, not city-states. Elon Musk commands attention and technology. Jeff Bezos commands logistics and consumption. Warren Buffett commands capital itself. None of them trade time for money. They sell systems, not labor. They've learned what the masses refuse to accept. Money flows toward control, not compliance. And yet most people still believe the medieval myth that effort equals wealth. If that were true, the miners, teachers, and construction workers of the world would be billionaires. But effort without leverage is servitude disguised as virtue. A man who works tirelessly but owns nothing is a man renting his freedom one paycheck at a time. Machiavelli would call it the new form of slavery citizenship under the illusion of security. Financial freedom, then, isn't about working less. It's about controlling more. It's the art of leverage, the ability to move without being moved, to command without constant effort. Look around you, every empire, every dynasty, every tech giant runs on this invisible equation. The rich multiply effort through systems, the poor multiply effort through sweat. One controls the machine, the other powers it. But here's where the deception deepens. Control begins not in reality, but in perception. Because perception shapes behavior, and behavior shapes wealth. The man who appears powerful becomes powerful, not because perception is fake, but because belief drives action. People follow signals, not truths. That's why kings wore crowns, why CEOs perform confidence, why influencers craft identity. They understand what most never will. That belief is infrastructure. Machiavelli warned that men judge more by what they see than by what they understand. In modern economics, that translates into a brutal fact. Financial systems aren't driven by fairness, they're driven by faith. The stock market moves on sentiment, not substance. Value today is perception quantified, and those who engineer belief, who control narrative, control fortune itself. The average person still believes safety equals success. Work 40 years, retire modestly, die quietly. They call that a plan. Machiavelli would call it captivity. Safety, he'd say, is the privilege of those already in power. For everyone else, it's a leash made of comfort. That leash doesn't just restrain ambition, it rewires the mind. Every paycheck earned through fear teaches obedience. Every act of obedience trades courage for convenience. And obedience, no matter how well paid, is still poverty in disguise. Meanwhile, those who escape that illusion operate by a different code. They don't trade effort, they trade direction. They don't clock in, they construct systems. They don't wait for approval, they design frameworks that make others depend on them. The powerful don't ask, "How can I earn more?" They ask, "What can I control?" Financial freedom begins when you stop being the worker inside the machine and start becoming the mind that designed it. Machiavelli wrote that a wise prince builds on foundations that others cannot shake. In our age, those foundations are systems, ownership, and attention, the modern fortresses of influence. So ask yourself, in the empire of your own life, are you the architect or the laborer? Because financial freedom doesn't come to those who wait for permission. It comes to those who think like rulers in a world built for subjects. And that's the first great secret Machiavelli buried beneath centuries of noise. Before you can own wealth, you must own perception. Whoever commands attention commands fortune. Control begins invisibly, long before anyone calls it power. The rich don't shout about leverage, they design it. The wise act before others even recognize the moment. Machiavelli said the wise man does at once what the fool does at last. This is the dividing line between those who create freedom and those who chase it forever. While most wait for clarity, the powerful act on conviction. They build systems that multiply themselves, platforms, products, content, ideas, things that work while they sleep. They understand that effort without leverage leads to exhaustion, but effort with leverage creates empires. Freedom has always belonged to those who understood leverage. The prince does not fight, he commands generals. The merchant does not sail, he owns the trade routes. And the modern elite, they don't work harder than you. They own the mechanisms that make your work profitable. The distribution, the algorithms, the infrastructure, the narrative. Every hour you scroll, click, or clock in feeds a system that someone else built. The secret the rich have always known is that real power doesn't come from participation, it comes from orchestration. Machiavelli wrote that a prince must learn to be both lion and fox, the lion for force, the fox for manipulation. Leverage is the synthesis of both, strength expressed through subtlety. You act once, and your action echoes 1,000 times. That's the design principle of modern empires: automation, delegation, replication. A single idea, a single video, a single product replicated endlessly through systems you no longer touch. That's how one person earns in a day what another toils for in a year, not because of luck, not because of genius, but because they work architecturally. Financial freedom begins when you think like an engineer of influence. The Medici didn't sell their time, they built the financial architecture that funded kings. Their genius wasn't in labor, but in leverage. They created networks that made power flow toward them. That pattern never died, it only evolved. Today, it exists in venture capital, in media platforms, in intellectual property. Freedom, in any era, belongs to those who design systems that continue creating value even after they stop touching them. A man who builds leverage no longer trades his body, he monetizes his mind. Machiavelli would have recognized this instantly. His doctrine of arms and laws, the balance of force and structure, is mirrored perfectly in modern wealth. In the digital age, arms are capital and laws are systems. Yet two new powers have joined them: people and perception. Together, these four multipliers, capital, people, knowledge, and attention, form what could be called the invisible empire of financial freedom. Let's begin with capital. The poor avoid it, the rich command it. Most people see debt as danger, but the powerful treat it as propulsion. They don't ask, "Can I afford this?" They ask, "Whose resources can I leverage?" From Renaissance bankers funding monarchs to modern founders scaling billion-dollar startups with investor money, the story repeats. Debt, when used strategically, is not a chain. It's a catapult. It multiplies your reach. The masses run from it because they've been trained to fear risk, while the elite use it to buy time. the most expensive asset on earth. The second multiplier is people. Machiavelli wrote that a prince is only as strong as those who serve him. In other words, delegation isn't weakness, it's multiplication. You can build slowly alone or exponentially with others. Every person you inspire, every mind you align to your vision, becomes an extension of your reach. The ruler doesn't polish his armor, he commands armies. The modern leader doesn't micromanage, he mobilizes. Elon Musk doesn't solder circuits. Jeff Bezos doesn't pack boxes. Warren Buffett doesn't shuffle spreadsheets. Each built a machine of minds, people who amplify their intent at scale. True freedom isn't solitary. It's networked. You escape limitation when others advance your mission without needing your permission. That's how influence compounds. The third multiplier, knowledge, is the most misunderstood. The world worships information, but information is worthless without insight. Machiavelli called this virtù, the sharpened perception that sees opportunity inside chaos. The wealthy act on patterns before they're visible to others. By the time the masses read the headline, the elite are already cashing in. Real freedom doesn't come from knowing everything. It comes from knowing sooner and acting faster. This is the psychological gap between rulers and workers. The worker waits for certainty. The ruler acts on probability. The worker needs permission. The ruler trusts pattern recognition. Neuroscience calls it anticipatory intelligence, the brain's ability to forecast reward before the data confirms it. In financial terms, it's what separates the investor from the speculator. The first moves when the second is still thinking. And then there's the fourth multiplier, the most underestimated of all attention. In Machiavelli's time, reputation was worth more than gold. It decided wars, alliances, and survival. Today, reputation has evolved into attention. It's the invisible currency that determines who gets opportunities, who raises capital, who shapes belief. If people know your name, you have leverage. If they trust your name, you have velocity. Machiavelli warned that men judge more by appearance than reality, and never has that been truer. Visibility is modern royalty. Influence is the new inheritance. The internet turned every individual into a media company, and the algorithm became the new throne. The influencers, the investors, the founders, they all rule by perception. A single broadcast of confidence can open doors that years of effort never could. Attention is a mirror of power. It reflects belief, amplifies presence, and converts perception into profit. The human brain is wired for narrative it craves, stories more than facts. Whoever controls the story controls the mind, and whoever controls the mind controls the market. When you understand these four levers, capital, people, knowledge, and attention, you stop asking, how can I work harder? And start asking, what can I build that works for me? That's the instant you evolve from worker to strategist, from participant to architect. But magnetism always carries a price. The moment you rise, the air thins. You begin to attract resistance, envy, even betrayal. It's an ancient law of ascent. Every act of power provokes those who profit from your submission. Machiavelli warned that a newly risen prince has as many enemies as he has beneficiaries. Every step toward freedom exposes the complacency of others, and the complacent despise reminders of their own stagnation. When you move fast, you become a mirror the world resents. People trapped in hesitation will call your ambition arrogance. They'll call your conviction greed. Yet this hostility is not failure, it's validation. It means your momentum threatens the order that keeps others comfortable. The more you rise, the louder mediocrity screams. This pattern is timeless. Innovators throughout history have lived this same paradox. When Elon Musk redefined multiple industries, they mocked him as delusional until his vision became infrastructure. When Jeff Bezos built Amazon, they said retail was untouchable until every competitor bent the knee. When Renaissance princes seized power, they were called tyrants until their statues became monuments to progress. In every age, those who defy permission are branded villains first, rulers later. The world always punishes speed before it celebrates it. Why? Because your acceleration exposes their inertia. The cautious man waits for certainty before acting. The Machiavellian acts before certainty exists, and in doing so, creates it. That's the paradox of freedom. The world rewards those who move before it's ready. Speed, in this sense, is not recklessness, it's dominance in motion. The modern world punishes hesitation far more than risk. Markets evolve by the minute. Technology rewrites opportunity overnight. In this environment, perfection is a liability. Perfection is the scabbard polished, pretty, but useless in battle. The sword is speed. Machiavelli compared fortune to a woman boldly claiming that she must be seized, not courted. He wasn't romanticizing aggression. He was describing timing. Opportunity does not wait to be wooed. It submits to those who move first. In finance, this law is visible everywhere. The first investor in a rising asset takes the lion's share. The first founder in a new niche sets the rules. The first creator to capture attention defines the narrative. The world rewards timing, not intention. But fear remains the great immobilizer. Fear of loss, fear of judgment, fear of failure. Most people call their fear prudence. They say they're waiting for the right time, the right plan, the right sign. But hesitation, disguised as prudence, is still paralysis. Machiavelli taught that fear should not be avoided, it should be mastered. He who controls fear controls those who fear. The bold don't silence their fear, they repurpose it. They turn anxiety into adrenaline, tension into movement. Neuroscience supports this fear, and excitement trigger nearly identical chemical reactions. The only difference is interpretation. The bold interpret fear as fuel. Every decisive act is an act of defiance against hesitation, and every bold decision compounds like interest. You make a call today that leads to 5 introductions tomorrow. You launch a product this month that earns trust for years. You strike when others stall, and soon their indecision becomes your fortress. Momentum compounds faster than capital. Each bold act widens the gap between those who act and those who analyze. Silent preparation, sudden execution, shocking results. This is how dynasties are built. The Medici mastered timing. They financed wars before kings even realized they'd need gold. The Rothschilds conquered Europe through speed of information, knowing who won at Waterloo before anyone else, and turning knowledge into empire. Today, traders, founders, and creators play the same game. They move before the signal becomes public. They act while others are still refreshing the feed. That's not luck, it's foresight weaponized. Machiavellian foresight. Momentum itself becomes gravity. People follow motion, not perfection. When they see someone moving decisively, they want to belong to that velocity. Investors invest, allies appear, customers convert. Speed creates its own ecosystem of opportunity. From the outside, it looks like luck, but luck is simply speed observed from a distance. Every surge in motion awakens resistance. As you rise, betrayal, jealousy, and sabotage become part of the terrain. The weak will whisper that you changed, but what they really mean is that you stopped asking for permission. The moment you stop living at their pace, you remind them of their paralysis, and people would rather attack a mirror than face their own reflection. Machiavelli understood this perfectly. He wrote that anyone who gains new power will always be hated by those who thrived under the old order. That hatred isn't a curse, it's confirmation. It means your ascent has begun to disturb equilibrium. You are no longer part of the landscape, you're reshaping it. Resistance, then, isn't the enemy. It's the proof. It's gravity pushing back against new altitude, and the higher you rise, the thinner the air becomes, less comfort, more clarity. You start to see that most opposition is emotional, not logical. People defend the status quo not because it's just, but because it's familiar. Neuroscience calls this status quo bias, the brain's tendency to cling to what's predictable, even when it's painful. Every act of progress threatens someone's comfort. Every movement forward forces the stagnant to confront their own stillness. That's why the world mocks the bold until it depends on them. The same pattern repeats across every era. Innovators, once ridiculed, become indispensable. Villains first, rulers later. Freedom, therefore, demands a certain ruthlessness, not cruelty, but clarity. The courage to keep building, even while misunderstood. To act without the need for applause. Machiavelli's prince does not wait for the crowd's approval. He earns it by winning. In the modern age, that means executing when others explain. The rich don't argue, they act. The powerful don't justify, they deliver. This is more than attitude, it's neuropsychological dominance. In decision-making science, momentum rewires perception. Action generates certainty, while hesitation breeds doubt. Once you act, your brain adjusts reality to justify your movement. That's how belief systems are built, through motion, not meditation. When you understand that, you stop seeking motivation. You use motion itself as fuel. The bold don't feel ready, they become ready by doing. And this is the essence of momentum as leverage. Once you move, the world begins to reorient around you. Attention follows velocity. People follow conviction. As Machiavelli observed, men are quick to join the victorious. Momentum is magnetic. It draws allies and resources to your side. The illusion of certainty becomes real because people believe what moves. But motion must be disciplined. Reckless speed destroys as quickly as it builds. True Machiavellian mastery lies in strategic acceleration, the art of moving fast without losing control. Like a blade cutting through fog, sharp, silent, inevitable. You don't explain your speed, you let it define you. The rich understand this implicitly. They know that every minute spent defending momentum is a minute not spent expanding it. You can't argue your way into dominance. You can only execute your way there. Once you reach that stage, opportunity stops being something you chase. It becomes something that chases you. The gravitational pull of consistent execution transforms perception. Capital seeks you. Talent seeks you. Partnerships, media, influence, they all begin to orbit your motion. That's the transition point from participant to source, from seeker to sovereign. You stop reacting to opportunity and start engineering it. The world begins to adjust its rhythm to yours. But Machiavelli's greatest lesson wasn't just how to rise, it was how to remain untouched once you do. The highest form of power isn't visible action, it's invisible architecture. Those who master it don't just win, they rewrite the rules entirely. Once you understand the machinery of speed, you reach a higher tier of freedom, strategic architecture. Machiavelli wrote that it is not titles that honor men, but men that honor titles. The true elite understand this. Their identity is not dependent on status, it creates status. Their wealth is not what defines them, it's what they deploy. The moment you stop chasing validation and start designing systems of influence, you ascend from income to sovereignty. At this level, wealth becomes an instrument, not an obsession. You move from surviving the market to shaping it, from following trends to dictating them, from asking for permission to setting the rules others must obey. Financial freedom, at its apex, is not about having enough. It's about building systems that regenerate power. Systems so foundational that others must depend on them. Look through history, and the pattern repeats. The Rockefellers didn't just sell oil, they built the infrastructure that controlled its flow. The Rothschilds didn't just lend money, they designed the architecture of global finance. In our age, Bezos didn't just sell books, he created a logistics empire that became the bloodstream of modern commerce. Musk didn't just build cars, he engineered ecosystems of energy, attention, and narrative. Each of these men obeyed a Machiavellian law: control the system, and you control the outcomes. They didn't chase profit. They owned the stage on which profit was performed. That's the evolution, from virtue to statecraft. The transformation, from participant to architect. True freedom begins when your influence becomes environmental, when others operate inside structures you designed. You no longer compete for opportunity, you define its boundaries. You stop chasing attention, you distribute it. You stop playing markets, you create them. This is the Machiavellian endgame, not to win within the system, but to own the system. Because when society depends on your design, your freedom compounds endlessly. You're no longer measured by income, but by indispensability. Others rely on your stability, your platforms, your structures, and that dependency becomes the engine of your sovereignty. But beware, every empire carries the same warning. The moment you slow down to seek comfort or approval, you begin to fall. Machiavelli wrote, "It is better to act and repent than not to act and regret." The powerful live by this. They don't pause for reassurance. They build through chaos, because chaos is the raw material of control. Resistance, envy, criticism, these are the taxes of dominance. The lion never apologizes for its roar. When the world pushes back, that's the signal that you've begun to matter. The more violently mediocrity resists you, the more proof you have that you're disturbing its peace. Let it. Every complaint is confirmation that your momentum has reached orbit. The powerless will always label the powerful as dangerous. They have to. It's a form of self-protection. Danger is simply what fear calls anything faster than itself. So when they call you dangerous, smile. It means your speed has outgrown their comprehension. Because once you master leverage, perception, and motion, you no longer chase opportunity, you become it. You become the gravitational center around which attention, capital, and influence revolve. That is the point of transformation. You stop asking, "How can I win?" and start asking, "How can I design the conditions under which winning becomes inevitable?" At that point, you've stepped beyond economics and into psychology. You've become the architect of belief itself. When you reach the level of the architect, money is no longer the finish line, it's the raw material of creation. You begin to see that what you've built isn't just a business or a brand, it's a self-sustaining ecosystem, a network that turns attention into gravity and gravity into wealth. This is what Machiavelli would have called virtue in its highest form, the disciplined intelligence to shape fortune rather than be shaped by it. The modern prince doesn't rule from a throne, he governs through systems. His influence moves faster than his presence. His voice echoes across markets before competitors even realize he's spoken. His true fortress isn't in his assets, it's in his architecture of influence. That's why the truly rich can lose everything and rebuild from nothing. Their wealth isn't stored in possessions, it's encoded in perception, structure, and relationships. They don't depend on the economy depends on them. Machiavelli warned that he who builds on the favor of fortune builds on sand, but he who builds on his own virtue builds on stone. Your virtue is your leverage, discipline, foresight, and the audacity to act while others hesitate. These are the foundations that no recession, no algorithm, no critic can shake. The elite understand that freedom is not a destination, it's a mechanism. It must be sustained through motion, strategy, and structure. Once you master leverage, conquer fear, and act faster than the doubt of the crowd, you stop being a person chasing wealth and become a force that generates it. You evolve from individual to institution, from name to network, from player to principle. Movements are born this way. They begin as ideas, crystallize into systems, and eventually become environments that define how others must operate. Movements don't ask for validation, they redefine it. They don't follow rules, they write them. This is the highest tier of freedom. Systemic control. The moment your influence becomes so integrated that society bends unconsciously around it, you've achieved what the Medicis, the Rothschilds, and the Rockefellers did: the transformation of personal power into structural permanence. The powerful don't chase markets. They create the conditions through which markets must pass. They don't compete for wealth. They construct frameworks that make wealth inevitable. That's why the richest aren't just wealthy, they're necessary. Amazon isn't just a company, it's infrastructure. Tesla isn't just a car manufacturer, it's a movement of energy, data, and narrative. Apple isn't just a brand, it's an ecosystem that dictates cultural behavior. These aren't businesses, they're modern empires, governed by the Machiavellian principle of indispensability. To become indispensable is to become free beyond wealth. When others depend on your vision, your systems, or your stability, you ascend to a kind of sovereignty that transcends money itself, because at that point, your influence becomes currency. But every empire hides a silent threat: stagnation. The moment you slow down to enjoy the comfort you've built, your edge dulls. The same discipline that elevated you must now evolve into vigilance. Machiavelli warned that fortune favors the bold, but he implied something deeper. Fortune abandons the complacent. To remain free, you must continue to build even when you could rest. You must keep shaping even when you could sit upon what's already yours. The storm must never still, because comfort is the counterfeit of freedom. It mimics security, but quietly erodes capacity. The truly free understand this. They see stability not as a home, but as a trap disguised as peace. The architects of lasting wealth live in a state of dynamic control. Stillness on the outside, motion underneath. They are serene only because their systems are in motion, even when they are not. That's why the elite don't fear losing money. They control the ecosystem that generates it. Their safety isn't in their bank balance, it's in their design. The system itself is the fortress. Machiavelli's modern prince doesn't sit atop a pile of gold. He sits atop a web of influence, attention, and capital that regenerates itself. Financial freedom, in this sense, is not passive income. It's active dominance. It's leverage made perpetual. It's systems that move capital, content, and consciousness while you sleep. That's why the rich can rebuild after collapse. Their fortress isn't visible. It's intellectual. It's relational. It's psychological. So what's the final step? There isn't one. Freedom isn't a finish line. It's a force you sustain. It's motion without exhaustion, expansion without permission. It's the ability to keep acting while others are still thinking. Once you master this rhythm, once you leverage fear into fuel, time into systems, and systems into sovereignty, you stop existing within the economy and start designing it. You become the weather others must forecast. You turn from man into movement, and movements don't chase, they command. They bend industries, shift narratives, and redefine what's possible. At this stage, you must ask yourself, are you willing to move so decisively that the old version of you would fear the new one? Are you willing to seize so much control that hesitation can't survive in your presence? Because fortune doesn't belong to the careful or the kind, it belongs to those who dare to rule themselves first. That's the final Machiavellian lesson. Before you can dominate systems, you must master your own psychology. You must become sovereign over your fear, your impulses, your narrative. The outer world bends only to those who have conquered the inner one. Financial freedom, then, is not a gift. It's not earned through compliance or endurance. It's conquered through clarity, speed, and strategic control. The world bends to the fast, the daring, and the disciplined. Be all three, and you won't just accumulate wealth, you'll command it. Because in the end, the fastest way to freedom has never been obedience. It has always been dominion. And dominion belongs to those who act while others watch.